Welcome, everyone, to a very special edition, a schedule edition of Fantasy Football Today here on CBS Sports Network. The schedule is out. The Browns have a very easy schedule. The Bears have a brutal schedule. Does that mean that the Browns are going to be better than the Bears? Obviously, it does. That's the kind of hard-hitting analysis you're getting today. In addition to schedule talk, we're also going to do some ADP review and a fun game called Who Has More. Everyone's been clamoring for it, so here we go. I'm Adam Azer with Jamie Eisenberg, Dave Richard, and Heath Cummings. And let's talk about the schedule and what it means. So that's my opening question for you guys. We'll go Jamie, Heath, Dave. Jamie, how much does the schedule matter when it comes to fantasy analysis?
It matters a little bit. I mean, obviously, you want to have a favorable schedule. You want to have easy opponents. You want to have situations where your fantasy players are going to benefit. But for me, it's always about what the beginning of the season looks like, more so than the middle or the end. At least that's when you know teams, for the most part, are going to be healthy. When you get to the middle part of the season, we know how much injuries take apart defenses, take apart teams. The end of the season is even worse. So I always try to look at the beginning part of the schedule, how much that matters the first 4 weeks. It's really just another deciding factor if you're talking about one player versus the next, but I don't really focus on it too much. It's not one of the biggest factors for me in deciding who I'm going to draft.
Keith, how about you?
No, I think it matters, but it probably matters more than we can specifically say before the season actually starts for a lot of the reasons that Jamie said. Like, it's going to matter. And it even matters like in terms of short weeks and days of rest. There's certainly going to be a time in the middle of the season where we're talking about this team is playing their third road game in 4 weeks and they've got 3 days of rest and we are concerned about them.
Yeah. Or it could be something like they're traveling to Australia and then they've got to get used to that. And then they've got to fly back to America or any other country that they're going to play football in this year. Look, it doesn't matter for studs. You're going to start Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs every single week. But we talk every week during the season about matchups. And we're starting this player because he's got a good matchup. If you knew a player had a gross looking schedule, wouldn't you want to use that information as at least a tiebreaker on draft day? I know that I would. So the bottom line is that it's information that can be used to help you make decisions on how you draft, how you build your team.
Yeah, I'll talk about this a little bit later, but DJ Moore is a guy that I was pretty excited to draft, and I still am a little bit, but looking at his early season schedule, he's got a lot of really, really difficult cornerbacks on that schedule. That's one thing we'll discuss a little bit later in the show. Also, you mentioned the international game, and I did some research before the show because San Francisco and the Rams, they're in Australia in week 1. I did some research. Australia is really far, guys. It's far. So just let y'all know that's quite a trip. It's in week 1, but maybe there'll be some after effects in week 2. All right. With that said, let's talk about the easiest schedules and the toughest schedules that you guys saw. Heath, I asked, who has the easiest schedule? You're talking about the Browns and the Saints. The Browns only have 2 matchups against teams that were top 10 in points per game allowed last year. But there you go. Based on the 2025 win percentage, those 2 are at the top. How much does that matter for you when it comes to the Browns and Saints?
It matters. And it's not just about like the opponent winning record in the past, although maybe with the Browns, it is more, especially Quinshon Judkins. Because I don't see a lot of teams on their schedule that are just going to blow them out of the building. That should keep them in closer to neutral game scripts, which should give them an opportunity to hand the ball off to Quinshon Judkins more. I think with their current quarterback situation, they would like to do that as often as possible. But it's also that the Browns play a lot of mediocre teams and play a lot of teams that are better on offense than they are on defense. They drew the AFC South and the NFC South this year. The AFC South's better defensively than the NFC South is, but good matchups for their weapons. And then the Saints, like, we're going to talk about their fantasy playoff schedule, so I won't get into that too much. But I just love the fact that they're going to have 0 cold weather games. They're going to be indoors for most of December. I think Cincinnati at the end of November is the last time they go north of the Mason-Dixon line. If you can tell everybody where the Mason-Dixon line is, that would probably help.
He doesn't know where Australia is.
Mason-Dixon line is a lot closer than Australia. That's basically all I know about that. So yeah, the Browns, and that's been kind of one of the headlines is the Browns, it's funny because we knew the matchups before the schedule release, but it's just to see it on paper. Browns have an easy schedule. Saints. Dave, you highlighted Minnesota and Detroit. Minnesota with a great postseason schedule with Washington and the Jets, and the last 2 weeks of the fantasy season. But Minnesota and Detroit, you like those two NFC North teams and their schedules?
The entire NFC North does not play against the Texans, the Broncos, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Seahawks. They don't even play against the many defenses that have improved over the offseason. I think this is going to be a division that we can target on draft day. And Minnesota and Detroit, maybe they've got the best two defenses in the division. I just like the layout for them and the opponents that they have. I think that they're going to have their way. This further solidifies Jahmyr Gibbs, by the way, as the clear-cut 101. It's this little bit of a tiebreaker that helps him get the nod over Bijan Robinson.
Okay, I love that. And yeah, Minnesota not having to face Minnesota's defense is huge because they allowed 1 touchdown pass in their last 8 games last year. It was insane. Jamie, you took this on from a slightly different angle. You're just focusing on weeks 1 through 4, and you've got 3 teams with good schedules in weeks 1 through 4. The Lions, Dave just mentioned, the Ravens, and the Packers.
Yeah, and kind of goes with Dave's theme about the NFC North. By the way, the Vikings actually face their defense the most, if you think about it. But when you talk about the way that I approach it, I look at the first 4 weeks of the season and who can get you off to a good start. So you got the Lions, they get the Saints, the Bills, the Jets, the Panthers. The Ravens, they get the Colts, the Saints, the Cowboys, the Titans. Packers get the Vikings, the Jets, the Falcons, and the Bucks. Those are all favorable matchups, not across the board, but for the majority of those first 4 weeks, they're getting favorable opponents. So you're looking for players that can get you off to a hot start. I think, as Dave said, the Lions can do it for the entirety of the season. Same thing probably with the Packers. The Ravens, new head coach, new play caller. I think that's going to be great for Lamar Jackson to get off to an early start, especially taking on the Colts and the Saints in those first 2 weeks. That could be very favorable for not only Lamar but Derrick Henry. But obviously all eyes are on, I think, this passing game, and Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, those type of guys can get off to a really good start in those first 4 games.
All right, so then those are the teams that have easy schedules or easy schedules at the beginning of the season. How about the toughest schedules? Heath, I talked about the Bears at the open of the show. The Bears, thankfully, one of their games against the Vikings is in Week 18, but you can talk about the fantasy playoffs. If you don't bring it up, I will, but I won't steal your thunder. But the Bears and the Eagles are 2 teams that you highlighted with bad schedules.
Yeah, well, Dave was talking about how great things are for the NFC North. I don't think it's very great for the Bears. They have to face the Packers twice. They have to go to Seattle. The week before they go to Seattle, they play against the Patriots. They play both teams from the Super Bowl. They got to face the Eagles in week 3. And then you look at their fantasy schedule, a couple of home games against division opponents, which Chicago in December, not great. It's worse than Chicago in December. Buffalo, so who they'll face in Buffalo in Week 15. I think it looks pretty miserable for the Bears. The Eagles maybe just a little bit better. It's an easier start if you're like Jamie, and that matters more to you against Washington and Tennessee at the start of the year. But a lot of very good defenses on their schedule.
And that's an important distinction, that the Bears have this kind of bad luck. It's predicted, and the other 3 teams don't, because they're playing that first place schedule. So they are the NFC North team that has to face Philadelphia and has to face Seattle, whereas the other 3 do not. Dave, Arizona and Washington, 2 teams that you looked at with difficult schedules.
And think about their division rivals in Arizona. The other teams in the NFC West, including the Seattle Seahawks and Washington. It's Philadelphia. And I think the Cowboys and Giants defenses are 2 of the most improved defensive units in the entire National Football League. Commanders have to go up against those teams twice each. And then on top of that, they've got the NFC West plus Houston. Arizona's got the NFC East. We talked about those teams. And the AFC West. That includes Denver. I don't think either of these schedules are particularly good. I have already downgraded Jeremiah Love, who I love, no pun intended, but I don't know if I can take him as high as I thought I could, because this schedule is going to be so hard. And I'm going to end up doing the exact same thing to Jaden Daniels. He was a top 6 fantasy quarterback for me, but by the time I finish evaluating this, I'm not sure how close. He'll be closer to 10 than he will be to 5. Let's just put it that way.
So Washington, obviously they have these tough games that you mentioned. If you're buying into the Dallas and the Giants, now I think the Giants secondary is still really bad. Dallas added a ton of pieces, but they're building basically from one of the worst defenses in football. But I will say this about Washington: they do have tough matchups. They also have the Giants twice. So I think it's really comes down to how you think about those 2 teams. Giants twice, Dallas once in the fantasy season. They have Tennessee. They have Arizona. So I saw enough good matchups on their schedule to maybe counteract the tough matchups, Dave, but I think maybe you're just higher on the Giants and Cowboys defenses.
think about that pass rush that New York has built. And as long as they keep it the way that it is with Brian Burns and Abdul Carter, if Thibodeau stays, and then they add Arvell Reese, they added Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker. I think their secondary is on the rise, and John Harbaugh gets a lot from no-name defensive tackles. And they added a pretty good one in DJ Reader. These guys aren't exactly Dexter Lawrence. Losing him, that stinks. But this is a defense that's going to surprise some people this year. In Dallas, we already saw their turnaround last year when they acquired Quinnen Williams, and now they've built around him. They got Caleb Downs in the draft. This is going to be a tough division, the NFC East. 3 really good defenses and the Commanders.
I'm going to throw a question here to Jamie. Jamie, Dave mentioned Jeremiah Love there with Arizona having a tough schedule. Could Jeremiah Love, we talked about Breece Hall on yesterday's podcast or 2 days ago, and he didn't really have a lot of carries because the Jets could never run the ball in the fourth quarter. They were always trailing. And you could see the same thing happening to Love, but do you think his involvement in the passing game will negate that effect a little bit or a lot, hopefully?
I mean, you certainly got to be hopeful for it. He can do it. It's a matter of will they allow him to do it if the backfield and the running back room stays as it is, because you could see a situation where Jeremiah Love is unfortunately potentially a trap back if Tyler Algier is getting goal line work and James Conner's still there and he's the one getting work in the passing game. So I hope that's not the case. I think if you're buying into Jeremiah Love, which clearly a lot of fantasy managers are, you look at his ADP so far in Fantasy Pros, for example, early round 3 pick, which I think is where he should go. I don't know if how many people are going to look at it and say, okay, the schedule is going to push him in one way or the other from how he will perform, meaning will he just have to get his production in the passing game? So you got to hope that, and again, we hate to use that word, but you got to hope that this offense continues to be a high volume offense, leading the NFL or close to the NFL as we saw last year in pass attempts, and that Jeremiah Love sort of is allowed to work in that realm. I would just like to see James Conner off the roster, get him on another team that maybe he can do some damage still, and that Love and Algier is the duo that we're looking at instead of a 3-headed monster here in Arizona.
Okay, let's talk about teams that have good early season schedules. You already heard Jamie talk about the Lions, Ravens, and Packers. Heath, you are highlighting the Chargers and the Ravens, who Jamie did mention. Chargers and Ravens are 2 teams that you like their early season schedules.
Yeah, the Chargers start off with the Arizona Cardinals and the Raiders. So if you want to get off to a good start, that is a great way to go about it. I think Jamie already talked a lot about the Ravens. I think their decent stretch actually goes longer. It's the Colts, then the Saints, then the Cowboys. Maybe they'll be great. Maybe they'll just be kind of good. Then the Titans and the Falcons. So 4 of their first 5 games should be against plus matchups.
Yeah, the Chargers week 3 at Buffalo, and that could be a good one for the Chargers too. It's high scoring. Dave, you like the Eagles and the Packers starting out the season.
Already talked about the Packers. Jamie, great call on that with the Vikings, Jets, Falcons, Bucks to begin the year. Chicago after that. And then for Philadelphia, it's 3 games to get this new offense off the ground. The Commanders, the Titans, and the Bears. I might be able to name 1 or 2 pass rushers on those 3 teams that might get to 7 sacks over the course of the year. I think it's just a fantastic start in that offensive line, assuming they're healthy to begin the year, should be able to help Philadelphia start 3-0. Big start for Saquon Barkley, big start for Jalen Hurts. And I don't know who's going to be there at wide receiver, but I would imagine Devontae Smith will be part of the picture.
Okay, teams with difficult schedules to start the year. Jamie gave us the Broncos, Commanders, and Rams. Heath agrees with the Commanders as they're at Philadelphia, at Dallas, Seattle, and Indianapolis in their first 4, but also the Patriots, Heath, who had the easiest schedule in football last year. That's why this stuff matters. The Patriots and the Niners, very easy schedules, and we saw it play out. They start with Seattle, Pittsburgh, Jacksonville was 8th best in scoring defense, and at Buffalo, so you don't like the Patriots start.
No, I hope we don't see A.J. Brown in week 4 reading a book on the sideline because he's unhappy with how things have started for the Patriots. But it is, we saw what this Patriots defense or this Seahawks defense did to the Patriots in the Super Bowl. It's going to be a very difficult matchup. I think it'll be a slow start for New England. Things get a little easier for them in the middle of the season when they start playing their own division.
Dave, the Colts and the Cardinals are teams that have difficult matchups to start the year.
I don't like that the Colts are starting with the Ravens, who I think their defense bounces back. And I do like Jesse Minter as a coordinator, and now he's their head coach. So he's going to have in that. Kansas City reloaded on defense. Houston, arguably the best defense in the National Football League. And 2 weeks after Houston, they play the Steelers. That is a tough start for a team with a quarterback coming back from a torn Achilles. And it makes me a little nervous about Jonathan Taylor, but not enough to move him in my rankings. As for Arizona, I could run down their first 11 games and you would throw up hearing it because it's going to be bad for an offense that honestly, we might need to hope that they get a lot of garbage time points for their peripherals to come through. The Trey McBrides, Marvin Harrisons, Michael Wilsons, and of course, Jeremiah Love. And their defense isn't particularly good either. And they're playing a lot of teams that have a lot of offenses. These are two teams with two tough starts. I would be a little bit nervous about anybody who's not obvious on the Colts or the Cardinals.
You know, Dave, I've always wanted one of our videos to go like super viral, like millions of views. And I think throwing up on air might be the one to do it, but I'm not quite ready to make that commitment. So we'll finish with week 1 DSTs to stream. Jamie, give me a DST that I could draft and start in week 1.
I don't know if you want to draft them for the season, but the Raiders get the Dolphins in week 1, and the Dolphins offense could be among the worst in the NFL. And so assuming that Max Crosby stays with the Raiders, he's probably going to be a little bit pissed off about how this offseason went for him. And so taking it out on the Dolphins and the lack of weapons that they have, that team's game plan more so for any other week than week 1, more so than any other week in the season. So hopefully the Dolphins offense and Bobby Slowick and that group have a good game plan for the Raiders. Raiders defense is not good, but the Dolphins defense might be worse. Dolphins offense might be worse.
Yeah. Heath, streaming DST in week 1.
I'm probably too optimistic about the Browns this year, but I am not optimistic about them in week 1 against Jacksonville. It's a road game. I don't really like cold weather teams going to Florida in September. That doesn't often go well. It'd be the first game in Todd Monken's new system. Their best 2 wide receivers may be rookies, and rookie wide receivers are generally a lot better in the second half of the season than they are in the first. And their best offensive player, Quinshon Judkins, is recovering from an injury and may not be 100% for week 1. So a lot of things that suggest the Browns will be better in the second half. In week 1, I think they could be awful at Jacksonville.
And Dave, you also like the Jaguars and the Browns, yeah?
I do, but one thing to keep in mind when you think about the Steelers, they're taking on Atlanta in week 1. And when you think about the Falcons, yeah, they've got Bijan Robinson and Drake London, but they've also got Tua Tagovailoa at quarterback. And that could be somebody that panics quite a bit. And the Steelers DST might be even the best DST that you can start in week number 1. You can remember that team as a potential season-long DST. You don't have to bother adding and dropping them all year long. They should be pretty good.
Adam, this is I mean, the idea is streaming defenses, right? Streaming defense. The Jaguars were 3rd last year as a defense, and they're being drafted as a top 10 option. The Steelers streaming?
No, drafting.
It's funny that the Jaguars are a top 10 DST in ADP.
They are number 9 on Fantasy Pros. They were the 3rd best DST last year.
Yeah, right. I was even surprised when I saw they were 8th best in points allowed.
So was I. I was like, oh, I can't use them. They're too high.
Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe it's good that fantasy drafters are seeing it, but I was honestly unaware that the Jaguars were 3rd best as a fantasy DST. That is wild. Without
you know what, and you know what? The majority of the world watching us right now is shocked by that exact same stat. I don't think many people were walking into their drafts thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to get the Jaguars DST. Steelers DST, I admit it's different. They're not a streaming option. I'm just saying that they've got a matchup that you're going to love in week 1.
All right. Well, we didn't throw up on the air.
Bunch of cheaters.
We did shock people with the Jaguars. We'll be right back to talk more about the schedule, including wide receivers who are going to see some tough cornerbacks this season, and just a look at the week 1 matchups and what's intriguing to us. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. One of the great things about fantasy football is that it takes games that you ordinarily wouldn't care about watching and turns them into must-see events. So with that said, looking at the week 1 schedule, I'm going to give you 5 week 1 games that I think are must-see games for fantasy purposes, and you can tell me how stupid I am. Jamie, game number 1, Atlanta at Pittsburgh. Who wants to watch this game? Well, I want to see the Pittsburgh running back splits, and I want to see if Kyle Pitts, I know Heath loves Kyle Pitts, if he can do something without Drake London on the field, which he basically has never done. So I think Atlanta at Pittsburgh is a very important game. How stupid am I? How stupid am I? I can't even speak. So there's a hint there.
There is never a game that does not matter. So they all matter. And I think it's going to be fun to see how this game unfolds. First off, who's the quarterback for the Falcons? Will we have an answer by then? Hopefully we do. But yes, I think you want to see how the weapons in Atlanta will look with a new head coach and potentially new quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa. You want to see what the Steelers' backfield is going to look like. You want to see what the new offense in Pittsburgh is going to look like with Mike McCarthy as well. So there's a lot of moving parts. I think anytime you have new play caller, new head coach, new personnel, it's the things that we should be studying and staring at the most and trying to figure out, okay, where our off-season, preseason, training camp, all the things that we put into it, all the time and effort and research, do we get it right, at least in the first week? So I think that's a great game that doesn't have usually the marquee teams that not a lot of people are going to be watching, but we'll certainly be keeping our eye on it for sure.
Heath, Baltimore at Indianapolis. I think this will be one of the marquee games, but from a fantasy standpoint, obviously a lot of intrigue about Daniel Jones, if he's the week 1 starter, what he'll look like. But what kind of routes will Alec Pierce be running? This is something we talked about earlier this week on the show. So I think this is a pretty intriguing game to get some answers mostly about the Colts offense.
I think it was really smart of you to not ask me how stupid you are, even though you asked Jamie. I would say that those things are very interesting, and we'll probably have a pretty good idea on Daniel Jones' health by the time we get there. I think the other wide receiver in Indianapolis, Josh Downs, the big key for him, does he become a full-time player? Is he the wide receiver who's on the field in all of their 2 wide receiver sets? As of right now, it looks like, yes, that could be huge for his fantasy value. And then we have a new offensive system in Baltimore. What does that look like? We'll be very interested to watch this game.
Dave, Chicago at Carolina. I think the target share for the Bears receivers is going to be under a microscope early in this season. So this game maybe will start answering some of those questions.
And it's J.C. Horn on the outside at one of the top cornerback spots for Carolina. He'll match up against Rome Odunze. It might make Odunze a fade in week 1, and it could open things up for Luther Burden, who we're really excited about, and Colson Loveland, the tight end that we're really excited about. I think those 2 guys could get a lot of work, and I could see Chicago pouring on the points on this game. I do think Carolina's defense has improved, but not to the point where they're going to be one of the better defenses in the league. So the Bears offense should get going. I worry a little bit about Rome Odunze.
I'm going to give you this next one to you as well, Dave. Jets at the Titans. I don't think people will be talking about this game, but I want to know how good Cam Ward can be. And he doesn't get talked about enough for a guy that was the number 1 pick 2 drafts ago. So I've got my eye. Look, that offense could be fun for fantasy if Cam Ward can take the step up. So what do you think about that game, Jets at Titans?
I mean, Jamie did say that every game matters for fantasy, and it's true. But do we have to watch this one? Do we have to really dig into the details on Jets Titans? Cam Newton's going to be interesting to watch, but it's not because of Cam Newton, at least not in 1 QB leagues. Nobody's going to start him, even though it is against the Jets. It's going to be more of the super flex leagues and whether or not he can hang as a number 2 quarterback. I love what the Titans have done this offseason. I love the addition of Brian Daboll as their play caller. The offensive line looks good. The receiving looks a little bit better. Carnell Tate, their first-round pick, he should absolutely help out Cam Ward, and they kept their running backs as is. I don't know if there's enough there to push Cam Ward into being a fantasy factor. And the Jets defense, for what it's worth, they should be far more aggressive playing out of a 3-4 scheme with Aaron Glenn calling the plays than they were last year.
So now I want to take a look at some wide receivers who have tough matchups this season, facing really good cornerbacks. And the first one I want to highlight is, I guess, Rashee Rice, but overall the Kansas City wide receivers. And I know Rashee Rice will line up in different spots, but I'll point out that he had 3 games last year against Denver, Houston, and the Chargers. And he scored 7.4 to 12.1 PPR fantasy points in those 3 games. So he was terrible. Rashee Rice scored 18.6 or more fantasy points in every other game. I look at the first 8 weeks for Kansas City. There's a bye in there. There's Denver twice. There's Indianapolis, which has good cornerbacks. There's Seattle as well. So, Jamie, any reason to be concerned? This might be more of a Mahomes thing, but it's kind of scary, I think. You do have Miami and Las Vegas, thankfully, but it's a really tough schedule for the Chiefs early on.
I think you said something there that matters, just about how they move around. This is a Chiefs offense that we have to keep an eye on early in the season for sure because of Mahomes. So is he going to be 100%? Is he going to be mobile? How much are they going to implement more of a run heavy offense, early in the season especially, but now that they invested so much in their backfield with 3 new additions of Kenneth Walker, Amari DiMercado, and Emmett Johnson, so this could be a different Chiefs team that we saw certainly last year, and last year Mahomes ran a lot. So I think you got to see Ken Rice, if he's Rashee Rice, I think Heath alluded to this on one of our shows recently on a podcast of just like what he's done the last 2 seasons, 16 plus PPR points, 18 plus PPR points in only a minimal sample size because of the suspensions and injuries. Like he's going to overcome these these certain tough matchups. Now, does that weigh him down a little bit? Maybe if you're talking about comparing him to Drake London and CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, those type of guys he's getting drafted around, then that's, again, looking at schedule and a tiebreaker. I just think he's in such a good spot because of the limited weapons in Kansas City's passing game. Hopefully Mahomes is ready for week 1. And again, they'll be versatile with him and how they use him. I think he's going to be fine. I think he's a borderline first-round pick.
Okay. Heath, let me get your thoughts on DJ Moore. At Houston in week 1, Detroit in week 2. When they're healthy, they have a pretty good secondary. Chargers in week 3, Patriots with their 2 great starting cornerbacks, at the Rams, who have the Chiefs starting corners from last year. That's a really tough start for DJ Moore. Any thoughts on maybe fading him?
I was kind of already fading him, but I also think that like every time we think we've figured something out about DJ Moore, he does something completely different than what everybody expected. He's done that throughout his entire career. I think the key there, though, for them might be the fact that Detroit, Los Angeles, the Patriots, the Rams, those teams we all expect to have good offenses. And we're probably, for the pass catchers in Buffalo, going to need teams to score points against the Bills so that they will call pass plays. So it might kind of even itself out, but I'm not going to rank him as a starter in week 1 against Houston.
Okay, last thing here, I just want to bring up Emeka Egbuka. His first 3 games are against teams that ranked 2nd, 5th, and 1st against wide receivers last year. Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Minnesota. Gets easier after that, but we'll spend time on a different show talking about that. Let's finish up this segment with our best fantasy postseason matchups. And the 2 teams that we wanted to highlight that were looking pretty good in weeks 15, 16, and 17. Dave, it's the Saints and the Falcons. Looking at the NFC South, Saints and Falcons maybe set up for good postseason success?
Maybe, and they play each other in week 17, so it's easy to figure out how that goes. And with the Falcons, it's the Commanders in week 15, the Bucks in week 16, the Saints have the Bucks in week 15, and then the Cardinals in week 16. Look, the bottom line is that as these defenses look right now, and it's the middle of May, but as they look on paper, they don't seem formidable. Both offenses have a chance to be good. Maybe for Atlanta, Michael Penix is playing at that point. That would make me a little bit more encouraged in the Falcons offense, but the studs that are there, yeah, they should, assuming they're healthy, assuming these defenses aren't better than we think, they should be in line to have some good numbers late in the year.
And since Dave and I agreed on this, I'll just add one small disagreement in that as bad as the Arizona schedule might be for the full season, Arizona was very close to making my best playoff schedules. They get a bye in week 14 right before the playoffs. And then it's Jets and Raiders at home, Saints on the road. That's pretty fantastic.
Excellent. All right. So stay patient, Jeremiah Love fantasy managers. That concludes the scheduling portion of today's show. When we come back, an early look at CBS average draft position and what stands out. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. The results are in. We've got drafts going on CBSSports.com, and so far the early, very early ADP, just a handful of drafts, has Jahmyr Gibbs 1, Bijan Robinson 2, Jamar Chase 3, Puka 4, JSN 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown 6. I'll just go ahead and read the next 200 or so. Or, I have a better idea. Let's play a game. It's called Agree or Disagree With. I'm going to give you one scenario from each round. We'll go Jamie, Dave, Heath. Tell me if you agree with these results or disagree. Jonathan Taylor and James Cook in full PPR, going ahead of Devon Achane and Chase Brown. Jonathan Taylor and James Cook ahead of Achane and Brown. Let's go Jamie, Dave, Heath. Go.
I do agree with this. I think Taylor, what we saw at the start of the season with the healthy Daniel Jones, is replicable, maybe not to the same heights, but certainly has the opportunity to perform at a high level. And maybe his receptions go up without Michael Pittman there. Heath alluded to Josh Downs being the second receiver. Can you name the third receiver aside from Tyler Warren, the tight end? Because it feels as the Indianapolis receiving corps is pretty barren right now. So I like the opportunity for Taylor to maybe get a few more opportunities in the passing game. We know he's always going to be a candidate to lead the NFL in rushing yards. He's going to work at the goal line. He's just awesome. So I'll take him over Achane and Brown. Cook's a little bit tougher to buy, but I think we're going to see a little bit more work for him as well. Obviously took a step forward with his total touches last year. Passing game work, still would like to see a little bit more, but once again, another guy that could lead the NFL in rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. Both these guys are just special. Devon Achane scares the hell out of me with the Dolphins offense. Chase Brown I actually would take ahead of Achane as well.
I'm in the exact same boat. And the thing that you have to worry about with Achane is that the entire system has changed. It's a new quarterback, new play caller, And he just got paid, so maybe that motivation has gone a little bit. I know the offensive line's good, and I know that Achane's good. But Malik Willis, when he was playing both in Green Bay and Tennessee, he would throw design plays to his running backs at times, but never checkdowns. He would take off and run before he threw a checkdown pass to his running back. That's concerning. Bobby Slowick's the new offensive coordinator. When he was calling plays in Houston, he leaned into the pass a little bit more, especially on third downs. And C.J. Stroud didn't throw to their running backs very often either. And I know it sounds stupid. Why wouldn't you throw to Devon Achane? Well, I don't know if they're going to do that enough, and I think it's going to really hurt his numbers. So I'm with you. Taylor and Cook all the way ahead of Achane. And Chase Brown, you know what? He should probably be ahead of Achane too.
So I think this is like a 100% agreement for me on Jonathan Taylor being first amongst this group. I've got him closer to Bijan and Gibbs in projections than I do the other guys. I have no idea to have any confidence at all in the whole Achane situation, because I think the things Dave and Jamie said are both right, and I'm cautious about those things. But also, Greg Dulcich might be their most proven pass catcher. Like Malik Washington is their most experienced wide receiver that's actually caught footballs in games recently. They've got their best rookie wide receiver, I think, is coming off of a torn ACL. I just don't see how it's anything other than 20 plus touches per game for Achane. Now, the offense might be awful. Maybe it's all rush attempts and there's no touchdowns. That's possible. But there's also still the potential for Achane to have a monster year on a terrible team.
All right, let's go to round two. Give me 15 seconds of analysis on each. We'll go Dave, Heath, Jamie. Ashton Jeanty going ahead of Derrick Henry. Do you agree with it?
What's the format? If it's full PPR, I'm with you. Jeanty had 40 more catches than Derrick Henry last year. Ashton Jeanty now has Derrick Henry's center from last year. The offense is going to be better in Las Vegas than it was last year. And I just think Jeanty has a better chance to get more touches. I know that sounds crazy when you think about Derrick Henry, but when you include those catches, I think he's going to get a lot of them. And I think that'll help put him over the top in full PPR. If it's half PPR or non-PPR, give me the old man, the strong man, the man that's built like RoboCop. Give me Derrick Henry.
Heath?
Yeah, I agree with it in terms of drafting. I have Derrick Henry projected for more fantasy points.
And Jamie?
Yeah, I would take Jeanty over Henry also. I think there's just a chance that we see a slight decline. Dave mentioned it with the offensive line. You know, Linderbaum going from Baltimore to Las Vegas is huge. Colton Miller, left tackle, being healthy is huge for the Raiders. And I think just a better system. The one concern would be is that Clint Kubiak is a coach, offense coordinator, now head coach, who likes to use multiple running backs. We saw it in Seattle with both Ken Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Does Mike Washington maybe take a little bit too much work from Jeanty? I'm not worried about that, but that's something that could certainly change from what we saw a year ago. So still like Jeanty over Henry, but it's close.
Okay, let's try 10 seconds maximum of analysis here because I have 7 more rounds to get to.
I'm going to have to go negative seconds to make up for the
I know. You're very much appreciated, Heath, and you get to lead off. Heath, Jamie, Dave, do you agree or disagree Josh Allen ahead of Jeremiah Love in round 3?
I disagree with it, and it doesn't matter at all because it's going to happen in the vast majority of fantasy leagues.
I disagree as well. I think you want to wait on quarterback this year, maybe more so than ever before. It's just such a very deep position. And I do think that Jeremiah Love is going to be a very solid rookie.
Cosign.
Perfect. Good job. All right, round 4. We'll go Jamie, Dave, Heath. Colston Loveland, 43rd overall. Do you agree with that ADP? He's tight end 3, 10 picks ahead of Tyler Warren. Jamie, Dave, Heath, just in general, Colston Loveland going 43rd overall. Do you agree with that ADP, Jamie?
Slightly too high, but that's the range.
I feel like Loveland has a chance to lead the Bears in targets this year. And when you're a tight end that can do that, you could be amazing for fantasy. I am cool with this ADP.
I agree with the ADP. I think there's some other tight ends behind him that are better values, but I think this is a good spot for Loveland.
Into round 5. Do you agree or disagree, Dave, Heath, Jamie, Luther Burden ahead of DJ Moore?
No, I'll take the younger receiver, the one that's got upside for maybe not quite as many targets as DJ Moore, but more explosiveness in his game and maybe more touchdowns than DJ Moore.
I think he sees more targets, catches more passes, has more yards, scores more touchdowns. 100% agree.
Agree as well.
All right, round 6. Do you agree or disagree? We'll go Heath, then Jamie, then Dave. David Montgomery going ahead of Chuba Hubbard and Tony Pollard. Heath, Jamie, Dave.
It is a split decision for me. I would go Pollard, then Montgomery, then Chuba Hubbard. I think it'll be really interesting to see just how much they put on the 29-year-old Montgomery's plate, but I like his chances to score more touchdowns than the other guys.
I think he does score more touchdowns than the other guys, but I'll take Chuba Hubbard first, Pollard second, Montgomery third. I think Hubbard has a bounce-back season because of the guys that he's sharing the ball with. Pollard, I think, will build off what he did at the end of last season, 15.5 PPR points in his last 5 games. Montgomery was not great at the end of the season and was taken off the field a lot, and I don't love the fact that he's just going to be, in my opinion, touchdown dependent.
He might be touchdown dependent, but I think he'll come through. This is Houston. This is a team with a great defense, and they will want to try and run the ball. They'll have more confidence in Montgomery than they had in their running backs last year. Montgomery might score more touchdowns than Chuba and Pollard combined. Give me David Montgomery.
All right, round 7. Do you agree or disagree with Carnell Tate going ahead of Chris Godwin? Jamie, Dave, Heath. Tate ahead of Godwin.
I do, but that's close. They're back-to-back in my rankings. I think Tate, if he hits, he's going to hit big. Godwin is in a very crowded receiving corps, as we're well aware, with Emeka Ibuka and now Ted Hurst potentially being a playmaker, Jalen McMillan. So even though they lose Mike Evans, I think there's a lot of mouths to feed for Tampa Bay. Tate, if he is the guy and 4th overall pick in the NFL draft, the Titans are expecting him to be the guy. I just think there's a higher ceiling for him this season, so I'll take Tate.
Can't argue against the ceiling, but I wonder if the catches favor Godwin. So if it's full PPR, I'll take the veteran. If it's half PPR or non-PPR, where yardage counts, touchdowns count more, I think Carnell Tate has the edge.
I've been saying this for a lot of years, Adams, but when an older wide receiver shows signs of decline, I would just like to believe him. And I think Chris Godwin, I mean, first off, he's just had a hard time staying healthy. I don't want to make that bet on him this year.
I thought you were going to go over the 10-second limit, Heath, but masterfully you fit that in. All right, that is it for our ADP review. I'd love to do more, but we have to get to our favorite game show, Who Has More, although slight variation of that, when we come back on Fantasy Football Today. It is time for America's 68th favorite fantasy football related game show. It is time for Who Had More. Note, Who Has More is still in the top 15. Who Had More, very unpopular game, but we're going to try to play it today. So our first Who Had More is, of course, extremely grammatically incorrect, but here's the first one. Who had more off-target rate last year? J.J. McCarthy or Caleb Williams?
So I'm going first, and I just want to say what a travesty it is that the all-time winningest game show member has to go first. I should have home field advantage. I will say Caleb Williams.
I'm going to agree, Caleb Williams.
I guess I'll be different and say J.J. McCarthy.
They were the 2 worst in the NFL in terms of off-target rate, but Caleb Williams is the answer. Who Had More is so bad that the contestants are required to keep their own score. So please keep your own score. Who had more rushing yards per start? Not the games he played early in the year, but per start. Jackson Dart or Kyler Murray?
I will say Jackson Dart. It's a New York Giants show.
I will agree.
I know this answer, so yes, it's Jackson Dart.
It is Jackson Dart, 40.6 to 34.6. Who had more
quarterback who was better than him last
year? Okay, yes. Wait, who had more?
Justin Fields.
Okay, yeah, that wasn't as obvious as I thought it was going to be. Who had more runs of 20 or more yards last year? Baker Mayfield or Saquon Barkley?
I will go with Baker Mayfield.
I refuse to believe it. I'm going to say Saquon.
I'll say Baker as well.
It is Baker Mayfield. He had 5 and Barkley had 4. Insane. Who had more runs?
Pathetic.
Yeah, bad, right? Who had more runs of 40 or more yards? Derrick Henry or the rest of the AFC North running backs?
Derrick Henry.
Henry for Heath.
I think Quinshon might have had 1 or 2. I'm still going to go with Derrick Henry because he finished the season so strong.
This is usually the part where Adam starts to switch it up, and the obvious isn't the obvious. So I'll go the rest of the AFC North.
Correct, Jamie. Man, you've got my number. The other AFC North running backs had 6. Derrick Henry had 4 runs of 40 or more yards. All right, who had more catches last year? Josh Jacobs in 15 games or Tucker Kraft in 8 games?
Neither one of them had a lot. I'll say Tucker Kraft.
I'll say Jacobs.
I will say Jacobs as well.
It is Jacobs. Heath is slumping 2 in a row for the champ that he's missed. All right, who had more touchdown catches last year? T. Higgins or Jamar Chase?
I'll say T. Higgins.
I believe it's Higgins.
It is Higgins.
You sure, Jamie? Because this is the part of the show where I mix things up.
T. Higgins has 21 touchdowns in his last 2 seasons. 10 2 years ago, 11 last year. So happened to do this research last night.
Damn it. You got to let me know these things. It is T. Higgins. Good job, guys. Who had more receiving yards in weeks 7 through 17? Week 7 was when CeeDee Lamb returned from injury. Who had more receiving yards in weeks 7 through 17? CeeDee Lamb or George Pickens?
I will go with CeeDee Lamb.
I know that Pickens averaged more PPR points per game. I'm going to say it's Pickens who had more yardage.
I believe it was Lamb. Pickens just had more touchdowns.
Oh, Jamie, I told you this on Express the other day. It was Pickens, 895 to 851. All right, it's a very close game. I have no idea who's winning. Last one.
I'm keeping score.
Okay, good. Who has more? Who has more moons, Saturn or Jupiter?
I think Saturn has rings, so I'm going to go with Jupiter.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's Jupiter.
I think it's Jupiter as well.
You guys are terrible at this. Saturn has 274 known moons. Jupiter has a measly 95. So it is Saturn.
Yeah, but that's their known moons, Adam. I didn't know we were not counting the unknown moons. They literally have thousands of unknown moons.
Do we have a winner? Anybody win?
Yeah.
Tied for Dave and Jamie.
The winner is nobody because this game show was so bad. I almost said a word that I shouldn't have said.
All right, we got to go. We'll be right back with your questions on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, after this on Fantasy Football Today. Back here to answer your questions. This one is from Eric. Jamie, which players should we forgive and give another shot to in 2026? And who are we holding grudges against, Pacheco?
I don't think Pacheco's that guy. Saquon Barkley comes to mind. Obviously didn't have the best of seasons based on what the expectations were. He's the one that I kind of gravitate toward that I'm going to go back to. Mike Evans is another one just because I'm hoping he's healthy.
No, I was holding the grudge against Pacheco. All right, good answer there. Next one here. Heath, what do you think about the Giants offense? You think they're going to be more run heavy with this Neighbors news?
I think they were probably already going to be a little more run heavy with Harbaugh. If Neighbors is not 100% on week 1, and we certainly don't know that yet, then yes, I would expect even more running. May not be Cam Scatterby, though. It might be Jackson Dart.
Yeah. Do you think Scatterby's value is tied to Neighbors' health?
No.
All right. Well, good show, guys. Good stuff. I want to thank all of you for watching and listening. Dave, any final thoughts before we go? We have about 10 seconds.
Scatterby's value is tied to his health, not Neighbors' health. It's kind of that way for everybody.
Great point. All right. Well, that was it for Fantasy Football Today. We gave you the schedule analysis. If you want to listen to the podcast, search for Fantasy Football Today anywhere you listen to podcasts. We'll talk more about the schedule next week and more mock drafts and things of that nature. For Dave, Jamie, and Heath, I'm Adam. Thanks for watching and enjoy your weekend, everyone.